All right, so we've talked about with the whole reason why all the causes, all the events that led up to the war, and obviously with the invasion of Poland, World War II is going to begin. All right, and then before I begin, we're just going to go over some basics about the war. Now, Britain, the Allied powers are here, the Axis powers, so the two sides of the war are going to be on the side. We got the Allied powers, and it goes through and names all these. But the main ones I have circled. Okay, so Britain, they are going to be really, by the end of this PowerPoint, they're going to be the only country that's left that's fighting the Soviet Union. Because the United States at this point, they're not in the war yet. The Soviet Union at this point, they're not in the war yet. So all these countries are going to fall very quickly to the Germans, and we'll talk about kind of why that is. And Britain's going to be the only one that's going to hold out until other members decide to join. Obviously, we joined because of Pearl Harbor. The Soviet Union's going to join because Hitler's going to get tired of trying to defeat Britain. He's going to attack them. So we'll talk about that later. But those are going to be the main three players on the Allied power side. And then Germany, Italy, and Japan. Italy is going to end up coming more like a puppet. Hitler looks up to Mussolini all this time. But really, in the end, he's gonna get tired of him. Like, dude, come on, carry your weight. Germany and Japan, though, are the major players in this. And so Hitler is going to take over Poland. He's going to unleash something that is completely new when he takes this over. Because remember, so far he hasn't really done anything. He hasn't really taken a country by force. He invades Czechoslovakia. That falls pretty easily. He takes, but he's given the Sudetenland. He's basically given us Austria. He takes over the Rhineland without a shot being fired. So this is really the first major test, but I don't even call it a test because he wipes it out like that. In less than a month, it's completely divided up. Remember, he attacks Poland from the east. The Soviet Union takes it. Nope, he attacks it from the west. The Soviet Union takes it from the east, and they divide Poland together. So Poland's going to be completely overwhelmed. But he unleashes this new fighting style called lightning war. It's called Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg tactics. He's going to stun Europe with this new style of fighting, and it's going to be very, very effective. Because if you remember, during World War I, World War I was we talked about how it was fought in the trenches, where you're just digging a hole in the ground and you just got to withstand enemy fire. The artilleries, you climb out of your trench, you try to take an enemy's position. That is old school. That is obviously not how this war is going to be fought. And the main reason why is there's two revolutionary weapons that were introduced in the First World War, but they're going to become much more efficient. That's the armored tank that was introduced in World War I and the combat aircraft. These two inventions that were created, used for the first time in World War I, they are going to be much more efficient in World War II, and a lot of countries didn't put the effort into these two pieces of equipment that Germany did, and that's going to lead to them having a lot of success early. All right, so the Panzer, the Blitzkrieg is where they would just basically have a bunch of tanks. They would have air forces. They'd bombard you with artillery, and then they would just overwhelm you with forces. They would get all up in your business, to put it in a correct political term, very, very quickly, and they would overwhelm you. It would create so much disorganization, so much chaos, because these fast-moving troops would just get right up on you. Right now, they'd cut your supplies off, and you'd be trapped. And it was a very, very quick victory because it was such a different way to fight. And not only that, but other countries like France and Poland, they were stuck in previous wars. They still had horseback soldiers, for crying out loud. That didn't even work in World War I. But like Poland still had a cavalry. They still had members that were on horses. The French, they built up this huge line, this massive line of trenches and bunkers and all this stuff right along the German border after the First World War. And they're like, yeah, it's called the Maginot Line. Like, yeah, go ahead and attack us, Germans. We'll be ready for you. The Germans just take their troops and they sweep through Belgium and they just take France very quickly. All right, and so this is going to be a much different style of fighting than World War I, and it's mainly because of this Blitzkrieg tactics. All right, and the U.S. and the British, they're all going to, the Soviet Union, they'll adopt this style as well. All right, but after Hitler invades Poland and war is declared in September of 39, all right, so September 39, the whole winter goes by and nothing happens. Everybody's like, that's weird. We thought maybe this would be more exciting, maybe something would happen. They called this the phony war. So when they declare war on Germany, nothing really goes down until April. All right, once April hits, Hitler's going to start taking over countries again. He's going to, like, everybody's like, nothing's going on. He's going to start taking over. He's going to take over Denmark and Norway like that. In May, he's going to use in May of 1940, of the next year, so it's getting a few months later, Germany's going to use these blitzkrieg tactics on France and the Netherlands. All right. So, once again, the blitzkrieg, successful German tactic of rapidly advancing armored forces, massive air support. It literally means lightning war. It hits you so fast. All right. And so these the British, the troops were forced to retreat to the beaches of Dunkirk. We're going to read a little bit about Dunkirk, depending when you watch notes, if you haven't. So by June, so Hitler attacks in May. He attacks France in May. By June of 1940, it's again a month later, he's pretty much got all of France. Now, if you remember from World War I, it literally took them 10 months to gain like a mile of territory, and he's taken an entire country, and he's taken entire countries in 2 months. 1 or 2 months of fighting. I mean, he's just taking over. So this is a very different style of fighting. He's going to have almost complete control of France by June. Controls Paris, controlled 3/5 of France. At this point, he's going to set up his own government. It's going to be called the Vichy France. And so by June of 1940, the only country that's standing against Hitler at this time, because he's taken everybody else out or they've allied with him, is Britain. Right. Dunkirk, I said we're gonna talk about that. The evacuation of Dunkirk was a stunning military achievement. It was an evacuation at the beaches. Basically, they had retreated to the beaches, and they had no way to get these soldiers out. So at Dunkirk, they have no way. They're stuck on these beaches. There's British soldiers there that were helping the French. There's some French soldiers there as well. But the British are like, man, if he comes through and wipes all these guys out, we're screwed. This is our military. We're going to lose all these men. We can't recoup this. 300,000 troops. That's crazy. And they're able to kind of hold them off. Hitler doesn't send his full force at them. Something because he wants them to surrender where the Treaty of Versailles was signed. He wants the French to surrender there, so he focuses more on that. And they call out to the British citizens, and they say, hey, if anybody has a boat that can help us, because they've got ships in the harbor, but they can't pull up close enough to get their troops. And they're pretty worried they'd be sitting ducks for the German planes. They basically said if anybody has a tugboat, yacht, fishing boat, anything that you can use to help us, please help us. Come help rescue our soldiers from France. And so a bunch of these civilian, up to 850 people responded, and they went across the English Channel, picked up the soldiers in France, and they came back. So just to give you an idea where they surrendered. So this is France. All right, so here's Dunkirk. I just pulled up a Google map just to give you an idea. So here is Great Britain. Obviously, London's there. All right, so they got to try to get them back to Dover. They got to try to get them back to Britain. But the problem is they're stuck here. So a bunch of civilian vessels traveled across, went, picked up, brought them back to the destroyers, went back, picked up, went back, brought them back, and they just kept making these troops until 300,000 soldiers were rescued. All right, so it was a stunning military achievement. It was one of the largest evacuations of all time, especially using civilian craft. And it's going to help keep the British in the war early. All right, so it was a huge boost for the British to keep them involved, because if they had lost that would have been Hitler would have probably taken control of that as well. They'd have no men left to defend against the Nazis. But Churchill, he's a smart guy. He's like, that was a great achievement. It was a stunning military achievement. We saved our men. But you don't win wars by evacuating. Right? So they're going to start to try to draw up game plans. Now, there's 3 ways that the Nazis are going to try to take out the British. One is he's going to try to focus on, because Britain is an island nation, so you can't just invade it. All right, so what they needed to do is they wanted to clear the airways, the Nazis that is. They wanted to clear all British planes because they couldn't send their troops over. They couldn't send ships over. Britain has a very powerful navy, but they wanted to clear all the planes out. They wanted to wipe out the Royal Air Force, and then they can use that to protect their boats, and they can bomb ships from below. They can drop bombs on ships. They can then launch an invasion if they can clear the air of the English Channel. And so that's what they did. That's what the Battle of Britain was. They tried to wipe out the British Air Force, the Royal Air Force. All right, so the German Luftwaffe, that's a fun word to say, the German Air Force began bombing airfields, vital industries. They wanted to knock the Royal Air Force out of commission. From August to September, the Germans sent 1,000 planes a day to attack the RAF, the Royal Air Force. But these were pretty experienced fighters. From some were left over from the First World War. They had been well trained. And when Churchill got in power, they started building that up. And so the Germans were unable to gain air supremacy because they had suffered greater losses during this Battle of Britain. And a lot of people believe that if the Battle of Britain had been lost, then Britain would have perished, because they could easily have launched a land invasion of Britain, and that would have been very difficult to stop the Nazis at that point. One of Britain's greatest defenses is the fact that they're an island. So then Hitler changed his tactics. Man, we can't claim air superiority over the Channel. If we just sent our troops, they'd be sitting ducks for the Royal Air Force. So we can't do that. So let's shift tactics. So now what they start to do is they start to implement these things. It's basically a terror bombing. We're just going to bomb them until they give up, is basically what Hitler said. We're going to bomb cities. We're going to bomb London. All right, we're going to bomb them until they just say, no more bombs. We give up. All right, and that's a huge deal. London is one of the largest, most popular cities in the world. It'd be like somebody just, New York City's attacked again. I mean, it's crazy to think that that's what happened. But so for about a 9-month campaign, the Germans are just dropping bombs on the British and British cities. Right? Some are vital targets, some are just terror bombings, trying to scare the people. The one night alone, they dropped 70,000 bombs on London. 70,000 bombs. Killing. The devastation was enormous. There's tons of damage that was done. They tried to wipe out British morale. And you can imagine, it's just a failed idea. Like, trying to wipe out British morale. Well, how are you going to, if anything, that's going to bring a country together. It's like when we were attacked on September 11th. One of the things that happened was they probably thought let's strike fear into America. And yeah, it did for a little bit, but it also unified America, brought everybody together. It's like somebody just attacked us on our soil. And that's really what happened with the British. Always let's just give up to them. No, they're like, no, let's take these guys out. Who do they think they are? It kind of unified Britain. And here's some pictures. And then the Battle of the Atlantic. This was a battle against commerce. They tried to basically cut them off from supplies. So the German U-boats tried to use their ability to sink any boats coming into to Britain to cut them off from supplies, so they cannot have access to those supplies. And so the U.S. was sending supplies over to help their ally, their most trusted ally, to help win the war. The Germans tried to cut them off using U-boats, keep them from getting supplies. The U.S. sent ships to protect it. And it was moderately successful, but in the end, they ended up losing. Right, so the Allies were able to get. So there's 3 ways that they did this. They tried to, 1, win air superiority over the English Channel. If we can take them out, that'll be good. The second way, they tried to implement these terror bombings by bombing civilian locations. And then the third way is they tried to cut them off from supplies, cutting them off from equipment, supplies, trying to basically starve them out that way. And that's how they tried to claim victory. Well, when that fails, what's going to happen is they are going to turn to Hitler's like, well, this war is going to last a little longer than I thought, so what do we do? Well, we need more supplies, we need more stuff. We've taken over pretty much all of Europe. Let's turn to the Soviet Union. All right, so Hitler's going to turn toward the Soviet Union. He's going to start taking over. He's going to break that non-aggression pact. If you remember from the earlier notes, him and Stalin agreed to divide Poland and not to fight each other. Well, after he can't take out Britain, he alters course and he institutes Operation Barbarossa. And he says, we're going to start attacking the Soviet Union. He betrayed Stalin. It's a bold move because it's going to end up pitting Germany in a 2-front war later on where they're going to have to fight on both sides. And it's going to be a downfall. It's going to be one of the reasons why why the Nazis are going to lose this war, because they bring the Soviets in, despite the fact that they have early success. The attacks took Stalin by surprise. The first days of fighting, the Germans destroyed a big part of the Soviet Air Force. They captured, obviously, a huge number of soldiers, 500,000 soldiers. Stalin basically told people, if you're going to retreat, burn everything you have so they can't get anything.
All right, burn everything you have. So when they show up, all they see are ashes. That's all I want them to get. All right. Because it takes a lot. You got to be able to supply these troops with food. When they're doing an invasion, they got to eat. They got to have clothes. They got